When just getting started selling microgreens, growing and selling, typically one of the first things you're gonna do is look for restaurants you can sell them to. And that's what I did. And so you may be kind of surprised to hear I no longer sell the restaurants and why that is. So there's a number of reasons why I stopped selling the restaurants. The number one reason though was actually COVID. When COVID hit, restaurants were really struggling. I felt like microgreens are kind of really were a luxury. It was one of the first things they could really kind of cut off the menu and still, keep people coming and getting some food. A lot of times they went to takeout only. Microgreens don't really do all that great on a takeout plate. I'm sure there are plates that they do well on that, but for the most part, the presentation's not going to be the same when it's in like a takeout container. So the microgreens just didn't add as much value to the restaurants anymore as they once did. Since then, restaurants have come back and they bounced back and everybody's back in business. There's been a lot of new ones open up. But I've made the decision personally to not really go after them. I'm not saying I'll never sell the restaurants again. The right opportunity comes along and I would sell to a restaurant, but just want to talk a little bit about why I'm really not that interested in going back to it. So there's a number of reasons. So I would say the number one reason was inconsistency. So once I would establish myself with a restaurant, they would have taken samples and they'll start wanting some. What I was doing that worked really well was I would bring whatever I grew like every week and let them pick from what I have. Trying to always make sure that I have stuff I know they want. Like if I know a restaurant wants amaranth, I'll try to grow that. If I know that they want basil, maybe I'll try to make sure I have basil. But really I want to get the stuff in there that does really well for me, which is like radish, really easy to grow, inexpensive, high yield harvest, pea shoots, broccoli, the things that are like really easy and you can get a lot from one tray. That's what I really want to sell. But restaurants sometimes don't want that. They want something else. So arugula is another one that they really want. But anyways, back to the inconsistency. So I would show up and sometimes I would deliver some amaranth and a couple of little things, and the restaurant manager would say, I want that amaranth every week. I love this. I want it every week. And I'm like, okay, great. We have a nice established relationship now. You're asking for something. I'm going to bring it to you every week. Well, you go back the next week and they say, oh, we actually have more of that left over than we expected to. And your microgreens are holding up so well, they're actually still good for the next week. So we don't need what you just brought us. Well, okay, that's not that big of a deal because usually I had a few other restaurants to go to deliver to, so that means they're gonna have a pick of that amaranth. But that amaranth was like, it was expensive seed, took longer to grow, took longer to harvest. You got a lot less from a tray than you would, broccoli or pea shoots or radish. So it's kind of a bummer. But then might go back the next week and you have amaranth again and you're excited to bring that to them. And this is where the inconsistencies get really big. So they might not be the same manager that there was last time you were there. So restaurants have huge turnover. You tend to think that whoever's in charge of the kitchen, who's the head chef, these people you tend to think that they're going to stick around, but you might only tend to think that if you're kind of naive and you haven't been in the restaurant business very long. The turnover is huge. And so you finally kind of figured out, okay, stuff lasts longer for them, so I'm only going to bring them this every other week or whatever. And then you go there and you find out there's somebody else in charge. So that's the second part of the inconsistencies, is that relationship building can be really hard because you just don't know. Any given week you walk in, there could be somebody else running the show because the other person left, they got fired, who knows what happened. And so because of that, what they want might not be the same thing that the last person wanted. Or maybe it is. Sometimes you get really lucky and they're like, I'm really glad you showed up because I didn't know how to get hold of you when the last guy left or the last girl left or whoever left. So I'm glad you're here and I want to keep buying from you. And so you keep dealing with them, but then maybe you had a payment arrangement with the last manager or head chef or whatever they are, and they paid you cash every time. And so you show up and you expect cash, but the new person maybe doesn't know how to pay you cash, and they're struggling to figure out how to get you a check, and it can be a real just pain. Like, and I'm talking about small things. Usually it's like a $40 order, $35 order, something like that. So it ends up being a hassle. Or you might even show up and they say, we have plenty of stuff left over from last time. We don't need anything. And so now you just brought a bunch of stuff. You spent some time harvesting it, labeling it, packaging it, and you have to hope that one of your next restaurants wants that stuff because they don't want anything now. And then you come back in 2 weeks and they do want everything, or you come back a week later and they do want everything again. But it's a really up and down, bumpy road with them. And I'll say that's not always the case. It's like some restaurants I had that were like that. Other ones would just, they knew I had sort of a policy of like minimum payment of, you have to buy $35 worth of stuff for me to show up. And they would do that every time. And they didn't care if they had stuff left over or whatever. I had some really good relationships as well. But it was a real mixed bag of how this all works with restaurants. Another thing that I found selling to restaurants directly was that I'm probably the only produce person showing up selling them something directly. And so they're used to dealing with their distributors. So a distributor shows up, they can tell them in advance, they can order online, they can do whatever they want. They already know when they're showing up, what they're gonna get. They've ordered it, they have their own payment arrangements and all that. Where I just kind of show up and they're expecting me to show up maybe on a Friday or a Thursday or whatever, and I show up, within 30 minutes of when I am expected to be there. And it can feel like sometimes it's off their schedule. They're not really used to dealing with that. It's like no time is a good time. So there are times that are better than others, and there's times that are worse than others to show up at a restaurant. And you can figure out what those times are. But a lot of times I'd show up and the manager that I'm used to dealing with, he's normally there on a Thursday at 3:30 in the afternoon, after lunch, before dinner. But for whatever reason, today he's not there. And so I just have to kind of like leave stuff and be like, well, we'll settle up next time I see him. And that's always worked. I've never had anybody owe me money for more than 2 or 3 visits. There have been times I've let them float for a little while, but for me, I'm a hobbyist. I even 4 or 5 years later, I'm still a hobbyist. I don't do this for a living. And so it's not that big of a deal for me to be like, yeah, we'll catch up next time. But it is a little bit of an irritant that it's like, I came over here, I made a special trip to deliver you microgreens and you're not here. Which also shows that you're not really a high priority to them, that they're not gonna make sure they're there. It's not their fault, it's just the truth of it is like, you're not that important to them. In some ways, I feel like if you're not going through a distributor and you're delivering directly, that in a way they're kind of helping you out, is the way it ends up kind of looking or feeling, is that for them to purchase your microgreens, yeah, they love them. They're getting the best microgreens they've ever had because they're so much more fresh than what they get from the distributor. But at the end of the day, the whole arrangement is sort of like a favor. It's like you're doing them a favor by giving them the best microgreens, but they're also doing you a favor by giving you the opportunity to sell them microgreens, which is a good thing. But in the grand scheme of the whole restaurant, it's not really a great thing for you for consistency. Like, you can build good relationships and they can last a long time, but when the things fall apart or they change every single time you go there, it's really hard for you to plan on what you need. Now, I will say another thing I have done though in the past with restaurants is that I would have a series of restaurants I'm going to go to. I have, a couple big bags full of different things. Some things that I'm really excited to bring them, like amaranth, or maybe I have, something else that took a really long time to grow. It was really nice. I'm excited to bring them that. And if they don't take what I brought, that's not a big deal, because usually what I would do is either that day or the next day I would end my journey at a small grocery store, like a farmer's market. There's some, up where I live, there's some stores that they're basically kind of like a farmer's market. All they sell is produce, and they're small, and you can talk to the owner or at least the store manager, and it's no problem getting in there. They'll take your stuff. Now that worked really well for me. So anything the restaurants didn't buy, I would bring straight to the market and sell it there. The one issue with that is it can be hard to get the high value crops to go through that market. So amaranth, sometimes I've had it where I can't keep it on the shelf at a small grocery store. And then other times I come back and all the amaranth is still there. Or something like a basil, it's really hard to justify the cost of basil at a small market when I'm asking for, $6 for 2 ounces of micro basil. And for your average home person that's going to bring this stuff home and eat it, they're like, that's crazy. I can buy a whole, bundle of full-size basil for a couple bucks, like 10 times as much stuff for a lot less money. The one thing I have found though is that if you sell to these small grocery stores, these little markets, a lot of times there are chefs, local chefs that shop those markets, and they're looking for good stuff, special things. And when they find something like a microgreen, they can be pretty excited and they'll buy it all. And so I've had that happen pretty consistently, that restaurants come in and they buy my microgreens from the market. The downside for that, for me, is a couple things. So number one is I make less. So when I sell directly to a restaurant, unless they're buying a lot, which nobody ever has, they've always bought a pound or so, I'm selling it for full cost. So let's say $6 for 2 ounces of just about anything. Let's just leave it at that, $6 for 2 ounces. Well, if I sell it to a store, there has to be enough margin for them to make money on it. So I might be selling for $4, and then they make $2 off of it. So I'm making less money at the store. There's another downside to it as well, is that if I sell to a restaurant directly, anything they bought, they own. I don't have to take back what they didn't use. Where at a store, if I go back, let's say I'm on a 1 week delivery, 1 day a week delivery, and nothing's sold, well, I have to take all that stuff back and then I replace it all for free. Or if there was half as much, maybe I only get paid for half of the new stuff I brought, because I always have them pay for everything I brought when I bring it. And so now I'm responsible for all the produce I bring. If it doesn't sell, then I replace it for free. You've already paid for it, and I'll keep replacing it until it has sold and that you've made your margin back at a store. At a restaurant, I don't have to worry about that. I sell it to them, they own it. When it goes bad or they've used it all, they buy more. But like I said, it can be kind of inconsistent. So I know this video has been kind of inconsistent on its own. I've been doing a lot of rambling here and trying to explain all this to you, but I'm just winging it in front of the camera, trying to tell you what my experience is with restaurants, why I'm not super interested in going back, and why I'm in a unique position as well. Like I said, I don't rely on this income at all. It's completely a hobby for me, something I enjoy doing. One of the other downside of not using restaurants so much is that it's a little bit less enjoyable to do some of the high-end experiments. There's certain things I just wouldn't grow because of a store it's not going to sell at. where a restaurant it would. And so it's a little bit less exciting there. At a store, you want to be kind of like more consistent, sell stuff people are used to seeing, they understand what it is. Where at a restaurant, you might be able to sell something a little bit more exotic, and they're very excited that you have it, and more than happy to pay for it. So there's that. There's ups and downs. There's a lot of different things to it and different aspects to think about. But yeah, unless the right deal comes along, I don't think I'm probably not going to go back to restaurants anytime soon. But like I said, don't hold me to that, because you never know. In a week or two, I could be making a video talking about how I put my restaurant delivery chain back together and I'm back on restaurants. So you never know. But I wanted to share with you just what the ups and downs are. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please consider subscribing. Hit the little bell if you want notifications anytime I make videos. I'm going to try to be more consistent. It's really been off the mark for like the past year. Have not made many videos at all. And I hope to get back into it and start making videos on all different things, not just microgreens, but all things gardening, outdoor stuff, improving just your general life. Thanks for watching.